and a lot of our friends in healthcare. For a lot of you, love Scott. I think that Scott, I've decided that a Matter of Innovation is going to declare him the health tech daredevil of 2021. As Scott was preparing this, and I think we all know he really went all in so that we could have a live event and really show that healthcare is back, that we're turning over the engine here at Dana Point at the beautiful Ritz-Carlton. And I think that we're all looking forward to being to more live events and really showing that our industry is resilient and that we've got a lot of great things going on. And part of that is to make sure that we have the capital that we need. So we're going to have Noam Krantz is going to lead us in a discussion where it's the different paths to raising capital and accelerating growth. It's going to be an innovator spotlight. So for our Daredevil of the Year, and we're going to turn it over to a great conversation while you're enjoying your lunch. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. So I'm Noam Krantz. I lead the West Coast JJDC, so Johnson & Johnson Development Corp. Equity Financing Group. I'm thrilled to be with a truly excellent group of innovators that have experienced quite a bit of success in the last few years with really different business models getting financed. And I was thinking about it this morning, and I thought, really, I think that one of the primary human instincts is to want to be an entrepreneur. And the big kind of blocking item for a lot of people is that ability or that fear of whether you can get financed or not. And here we have four really great success stories. So perhaps let's just start off by a round of introductions. Maybe if each one of you can introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about what your company does, and maybe what you feel is kind of the coolest thing about your company, and then we'll get into more of the financing details. Start with Adam, because you're to my left here.
All right, hey everybody. I'm Adam Sachs. I'm the founding CEO of Vicarious Surgical. So our company designs a tiny little surgical robot that goes into a patient's insufflated abdomen through a single 15 millimeter incision. And then once it's inside, it has a level of capability that really parallels and in many ways exceeds multi-port robotics.
Sounds great. Let's go down the line.
Hello, my name is Dennis Kogan. I'm the founding CEO of Caresyntax. Our company has a digital operating system supporting most of the key surgical processes. So software applications that live at the point of care before the operating room, in the operating room, and after, essentially supporting decision-making for all key operational and clinical processes that sort of comprise the entire patient outcome. We work with hospitals, but we also partner with a lot of key industry stakeholders, insurance companies, medtech companies, both who work with us as resellers and as partners and end users of some of our technology. So we're sort of a convergent business in terms of being with part of our business model implanted in the classic software as a service tech side of things, but we're also dealing with a lot of clinical topics and device vendors in terms of trying to figure out how our digital solutions and technology can be part of more clinical use cases. And we're originally a German company. We were born in Berlin, but we re-domiciled to the US, partly because of the capital markets here, but also because a lot of our customers are here. And now we're kind of based between San Francisco, Milwaukee, Boston, and still Berlin.
That's great.
Nadine? Hi everyone, my name is Nadine. I'm also a surgeon by training, but I'm a founding CEO of Proximie. And Proximie is really a software platform that's connecting operating rooms all around the world. And it's creating the operating system that's allowing us to share best practice, aggregate expertise, and repurpose that expertise back into the operating room. So we're a software now that's connecting operating rooms in over 40 countries, connecting surgeons from a telementoring and support infrastructure in real time, but also connecting and collecting data from all these different operating rooms and all these different systems to try and understand and become more intelligent about how we optimize the delivery of surgical care and how do we extend the data pipeline across surgery to better understand why do we have so much variation, Why is it today that 2/3 of the world's population doesn't have access to safe surgery? And how do we keep up with this growing considerable gap between the number of clinicians that can deliver expertise and the number of patients that need it? And we're originally London-based, but we have a team based in San Francisco now. We're domiciled both in the US and in the UK.
Great. My name is Lishan Aklog. I'm actually also a surgeon, so I think that must be a common theme here, former heart surgeon. I'm co-founder, chairman, and CEO of PAVmed, Inc. We're a NASDAQ-listed public company. We're a bit of an unusual beast. We're a multi-product commercial stage company. We have products in our portfolio across the spectrum of clinical conditions, including more recently into the diagnostic space. We have a major subsidiary in the diagnostic space that works on esophageal biomarkers for esophageal disease. I also just like to, sitting on the podium here, I'd like to congratulate Scott and the LSI team because it's really quite remarkable. This meeting it's just hard to imagine that you would have been able to pull this off when you announced this 4 months ago. So I just thought I'd take a moment to congratulate you on pulling off a great meeting.
So maybe, Lishan, we'll start with you, because it seems like your model is really closely linked to the ability to get financed and innovation really intertwined with your financing. So can you talk a little bit about your business model and how that relates to how you chose to finance the company?
Sure. I think probably the best way to understand it, since we did not follow the typical script, is to take it a bit chronologically. So we found ourselves in 2012 having our group had created single product VC-backed companies. We had sold one. We had two others that were in the process of commercializing. And we realized we needed a new vehicle that could do multiple products within a single vehicle. It could be have a streamlined way for us to bring in outside innovations from academic centers. So that was kind of our vision. And we struggled with the VC model, given that this wasn't kind of a typical sort of scripted, innovative life sciences company approach. We looked at private equity, and oddly, it worked out great, but we ended up crossing paths. I live in New York, and crossing paths with a couple of folks on Wall Street who are really passionate about early stage access to the public markets for small companies. And even though we were pre-revenue, we had a good pipeline, but no prospects for commercialization in the early in the foreseeable future. We decided to pursue that path, and so we went public on NASDAQ in a very small offering, almost exactly 5 years today, just a $5 million offering, and we've raised over the past 5 years about $170 million, including 75 between, I like to say, Christmas and Valentine's Day. And it's been an interesting ride. I mean, there are definitely pros and cons to being public in a pre-commercial stage. It can be quite painful. You're in a glass house, basically sitting naked, getting judged every day, and that's sort of an interesting perspective. But what I've really appreciated about it, and what's been critical for our business model, is that we're not really beholden to. We can be, flexible and nimble in pursuing opportunities that we find attractive without having to get effectively permission. So the best example of that is we moved from pure devices into diagnostics because we had an opportunity that became available to us. There's no scenario where that would have happened if we hadn't been a public company. So I'll leave it at that.
That's amazing. Did you do like a traditional roadshow in the early days? And
The IPO was interesting. It was a front door IPO. It wasn't a reverse merger into a shell. It wasn't a SPAC. We just wanted to get listed, so we essentially raised the $5 million ourselves.
Wow.
From industry folks, people we knew, other physicians. The bankers didn't raise a lot of that money for us. Nowadays, we're very much dependent on the bankers to do that.
Would you recommend that approach to people in the audience here?
Not necessarily to everybody, but I would consider it. Public capital has, once you're entrenched and once you've moved up a bit up the food chain, it's quick capital, and it doesn't work. You don't have to do 30 meetings with VCs to get your next round. So,
Amazing.
Our last round was a bought deal by Cantor, where they called us up at 2 p.m. and said, your stock's had a nice run today. You want to raise some money? And we did a non-deal roadshow at 5:30 that day and closed on $45 million the next
Wow.
morning. So
That's amazing.
it's hard to do that in the private markets. But just to be clear, it's not all bed of roses. I mean, there was a lot of pain in the
Yeah.
early days as well.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. Really interesting. So maybe we'll move over to kind of the opposite end on the public side to Adam here, who just went public in the last few weeks, right?
Yeah, we announced a few weeks ago, so the merger will be completed in probably in August.
Amazing. So describe a little bit about the SPAC experience for you and how how it relates, I guess, to your business model and the technology.
Yeah, so overall, we decided to do the SPAC route about somewhere around October of last year, and I mean it's for a lot of the same reasons. The public markets have, I think, a really unique place in access to capital overall, given the liquidity that it provides to investors. So that being said, when we look at how that relates to our business model, it is certainly unconventional. But so when you look at our company, there's a $100 billion market cap incumbent that has a couple % of the entire market, right? The TAM here is incredible. It's been, nobody has really succeeded in cracking that nut yet and breaking into it, but the opportunity has been sort of just sitting there for a long time.
Yeah.
So, and that I think that's pretty unique in frankly in medical devices. It's to have a multi-$100 billion TAM. So because of that, we really felt that this can follow more of a biotech pharma story than a conventional medical devices story, where we can look toward future opportunity, future revenue, existing market validation, and have the opportunity to go public earlier. But I'll say, to echo, it's certainly not without pain. The bankers have an incredibly important place in the industry, but you still have to raise the money yourself, 100%. It's out of the 460 we raised, I think it was about 450 were probably raised by our management team. Wow. It's I would totally agree with that, and it is of course a glass house. So I'd say not necessarily the avenue I would recommend unless you have both the need for a huge amount of capital as well as the market opportunity to justify that capital raise. But if you have both of those, it's really a fantastic option.
Right. So for you, it was largely a strategic decision that you needed a large amount of capital to compete against a very large competitor. It sounds like for Lishan, it was more about access to capital markets, regular financing, being able to finance potentially smaller products faster, more of a turnover of products. Nadine, maybe we'll move the same question to you. Congratulations, by the way, on wearing J&J red. We appreciate it. How does your business model?
Find a way to stand out, so I
Yeah.
wear an orange suit. Yeah.
How does your business model relate your technology to how you've chosen to finance the company?
I mean, it was a combination of, stumbling onto an opportunity. When we started Proximie, we weren't looking to raise money or start a company. It was really just trying to solve the problem. I was a surgeon for 10 years. I was incredibly frustrated with just the challenges I was facing every single day. And it was really 2 years after Proximie had been tested in different countries, and we were seeing real traction in both benefits to patients, impact, and engagement from clinicians, that CNN kind of caught wind of what we were doing and put this article out there, is this the future of surgery? And so at that point, I think Scott spoke about it earlier, you need to sit down with the family and have a real conversation, like, are we going to commit ourselves as a family to do this? Because it's a full-time, it's more than a full-time commitment. So at that point, it was clear we needed to raise money to really scale this out and kind of set up a company. Because of everything that was happening, and we were coming at it really differently. A lot of companies at the time were still looking at hardware solutions, hardware focus, and I was coming at it purely platform, not point solution. I want a platform approach. I want an aggregator approach. I want a solution that's cloud-based. It's going to connect everyone. It was a different pull, and you're almost having to educate the industry in that sense, as well as trying to raise money. So we just found it easier to raise private money at that point. Just individual investors were really keen, gave us some money, and we were off to the races. And we started commercializing a couple years later. And at that point, we realized we probably need to bring in some more institutional funding, as well as a combination of valuable, high net worth individuals who could help us. So for our Series A, we did the traditional VC approach, But then we were also really lucky. We got some high net worth individuals that were really keen and dedicated to impact. And so people like, Curtis Chambers, who was the CTO of Uber kind of before they went public,
Wow.
dedicated his life now, dedicated his funding to impact ventures and impact opportunities. And his expertise in a completely different industry, which is Uber operations scale, made sense for us from a software play, from a platform play, global, with all the different compliances you need to think of. So that kind of combination made sense. And of course, most people know about our last raise, which was traditional institutional VCs.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
Dennis, same question to you. Business model, technology, how it relates to finance.
Yeah, no, I mean, I echo some of the comments. I think, for us, I think data, aspect of clinical data was always part of, our vision in terms of building products. And we started doing that, in 2013 when clinical data in surgery, was really not available, and it's buried in silos, devices, spreadsheets on paper. And so for us at the time, having the vision of an operating system, a data-driven operating system, kind of akin to what you see in consumer space outside healthcare, or what you see in clinical oncology, even with like Flatiron or Tempus now with Eric building it in Chicago. That was quite a stretch for most early stage VCs, especially in Germany, right? When we started, there were not a lot of healthcare specialists. So for us, that, in order to get started, we knew there was a non-starter with local funds. So we were fortunate that, my partner and I was our second venture, and we kind of dreamt up this alternative approach out of business school by using, I don't know if you're familiar with the search fund model. It's essentially like a private SPAC. Where you can, essentially start a pledge fund with, your money and that of your co-investors to kind of start a company.
Really?
And essentially that's what we did. We pulled $30 million in pledged commitments to start this company, and this money was released to us based on milestones of what we're hitting. So I recognize a lot of the same stuff in the public SPAC market, and I know how it is to kind of be sitting there with money in the trust, and you know what you need to do, but you need to prove it. But that was our starting point, and I think it was in the end successful in providing us with capital in a kind of a barren environment where there was no capital available for us.
So you got the capital in advance of actually the full concept, or?
Yeah, we got the capital for kind of a business plan which involved building new software to get to data, but also to potentially get a kind of a non-traditional entry point. So one of the interesting things about us is that we acquired a company pretty much like the day after we were founded, and that company had a hardware piece that we built our software into. So we had access to a couple of hundred hospitals in Germany basically on day two, and we keep talking a lot about it, but in the end it was a very successful move, and I'm a big proponent of kind of a buy and build things in digital healthcare. That being said, that was then, and now things are changing, right? So like we all had like a square peg in a round hole kind of situation, and I think we've ground down the square into a round because, I think there was like $500 million flowing into digital surgery in the last 6 months from traditional VCs too. So the markets have caught up. So we kind of converged into the more traditional capital markets. We had a Series B 2 years ago that was led by strategics at that time. So we have 6 strategic investors over the last 2 rounds, Intel, Optum, Barco, Reliance, an insurance company. That was a big intermediate step, when the financial investors were, I guess still somewhat on the sidelines, at least in Europe. And in this round, we just wrapped up $100 million. So we raised about 170 as well over the last 5-6 years. And this round was led by a crossover investor.
Wow.
With participation from classic venture financial investors and again strategics. And so, the markets are shaping up, and I think for us, this initial family office and high net worth individual pool, which by the way included, folks like former head of Carlisle's healthcare, that was an important jolt, and the strategics, they filled the gap in between because they saw value in our technology.
Right. So what, and maybe we'll move, back over to Lishan. I was thinking from the audience's perspective, you have a lot of really early stage companies. Maybe they're almost pre-financing to some degree. At what point did you realize, or kind of this tipping point of, I have the idea, I have the concept, I'm going to get it financed, and you feel like you're successful? You know, like
Well, I think everybody in this room and everybody on this panel has a bit of that. You know, you have to have a little bit of that cockiness that says, I've got something great and it's going to work, and eventually someone's going to, validate it. So I think that's just intrinsic in the personalities of folks in the room here. But on the other side, there's always, I think when we were sitting earlier, someone asked what keeps you up at night. I mean, there are constant worries about. We had some early days after we burned through that first $5 million where, I hired a CFO, and 2 months later, I told him we're all going to have to stop taking salary for a little bit until we figure out where our next round comes from. So all of those, all of that stuff is still hovering, and it doesn't go away. I mean, as you have more access to more and to better capital, it's still, it expands and it transforms itself a bit, but it's always there. So I think that's just intrinsic, the balance between being confident, having a sense of your own vision and confidence in your vision and your team, but also understanding that there are boogeymen around the corner, around every corner that you have to keep an eye on.
So you're saying the tipping point's kind of always out there.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe that's actually
Would you agree,
a
Adam?
way to summarize it.
Would you agree?
Yeah, no, totally. It's I think was your question when did we feel like we'd gotten there? Not yet. It's
Well, you're a public company soon.
yeah.
And,
There's always a milestone, right? I'd like to believe that as soon as you feel like you've made it and you're there, you should probably step aside and let somebody else who has the drive for the next step forward and the next milestone to take over and run it. But early on, I think for us it was there was a lot of belief in the technology. We funded it ourselves. We kind of proved out that the robotics was better, but getting that first check from outside investors is hard. It was that first check was definitely the hardest check for us.
so quite a bit easier after that.
Yeah, I think probably the second check was the second hardest check, and the third check was the third hardest check. Because once you get to the point where we're at now, you have a device that that works, that you can prove it out, you can do real market validation, and then it becomes a lot more of a question of timing to market and valuation rather than am I gonna lose all the money, right? So
I just had one quick thing, because I think as I was thinking about it, part of this relates to the fact that you're always taking risks, right? So you're never settled because, if you're moving forward, you're always going to be taking risks. There may be different risks, and so if you're not taking risks, then you're not moving forward. So there's no real opportunity to ever feel settled. You may have access to more capital, you may have access to better capital, but it's in the furtherance of taking some risks to grow and to expand your enterprise.
That's the beauty of a startup, right? That you can do that. That you have the privilege of being able to kind of bet the farm on your fundamental beliefs. You just have to do it kind of the right number of times and on the right things.
Nadine, do you feel the same way? Do you feel that's getting easier as you go now as far as financing?
I mean, definitely, as kind of Dennis alluded to, this last 6 months, we've really seen that inflection in surgery and that desire. So, I'm sure around this time, and for us particularly, this was particularly oversubscribed. But we found our kind of second round, that kind of series. You're moving from that early stage, I've got an idea, I've got a proof of concept, to I've now got a commercial model I need to execute on, I need to focus. That kind of Series A round can be that big first hurdle you need to get over. This round, thankfully, was a lot smoother for us. So, we were able to really engage with so many investors who were interested in what we were doing. And I always look at it as a learning opportunity. You meet so many investors, and yes, you may end up selecting a few, but you learn so much from all of them. The way they look at the market, the questions that they ask you, the way they push you to think through. You're not going to have the answers to every question, but if they can, evaluate your adaptability, your kind of thinking on the spot, and what you can evolve through those discussions, I think is really, really powerful. So, but it's, I think we definitely don't want to give the misconception, as you said, that it's a bed of roses. I mean, it's a challenge, particularly as a CEO who's trying to raise money, grow a company, take risks, grow. You're constantly on this kind of hamster wheel, pushing through all those different things you need to get through. But then you surround yourselves with a fantastic team, and you can do it. I've been really fortunate to have a great team around me.
So Nadine, to your point, I mean, you say you were oversubscribed. How did you decide which investors you wanted to have around the table?
I mean, it's a great question, and for us, it was a lot of discussions internally about what are we looking for in investors and the trajectory that Proximie. I think the key is kind of the belief in the mission and the vision that we have, which is vast. As I said earlier, 5 billion people don't have access to safe surgery. The operating room is largely a black hole. It's undigitized. There's so much work to be done in connecting the dots and de-siloing a lot of that information. So we were looking for investors that really had that big vision alongside with us and kind of understood the path that we were going on and the risks that we needed to take to get there. The other bit, I think it's not only the name of the fund, it's often who's the partner or the individual that's going to be dedicating their time to you, because you need to build that chemistry and that relationship with them. And for us, as a team, it's really important to have that regularity of the relationship, to feel comfortable having conversations and really openly walk through what are the challenges and what are things that are going well. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's other focuses that different companies will take, whether it's geographic, whether, in some cases people have taken strategic money for a reason. We decided not to take strategic money to give ourselves the opportunity to stay more broad in our offering. But there are many other considerations. But for us at this round, it was really about the mission and vision and the belief, and largely who is the partner that was going to work with us to give us their time and dedication.
Dennis, the same for you, or how did you decide your investor base?
Well, in our case, we were oversubscribed, but we extended the round. So that's also a decision entrepreneurs should take, right? And existing investors, how much dilution you can stomach. I think for big problems, you need a lot of capital. So we try to accommodate as much, not everybody, but most of the key players who wanted to come in came in. So I think that's not the toughest dilemma. I feel like when you have capital knocking on your door, I think you can find ways to accommodate, and you should, right? Unless you are, a very lean, mean machine, which again, in healthcare, that's been tough, right? You see, folks raising $30-40 million in enterprise SaaS or consumer SaaS and just going all the way to a, $30 billion valuation. I don't know that that's feasible, especially on the clinical side of healthcare. There are some guys in our neck of the woods like Cedar and Olive who are kind of on the operations side of revenue cycle. I think that's maybe more feasible. On the clinical side, my personal opinion, if you want to change something, you've got to capitalize, and you've got to hope that you're going to get your return later on by getting to that commercial stage, and then it'll start scaling, and you'll get credit for that in future valuation. And so.
And Lishan, is that not a problem for you now that since you've been public for quite a while?
In terms of selecting?
Yeah, I mean, people, they select you, I guess, at some point.
Yeah, right? I mean, our last spot round was oversubscribed, but when you start off at the early stages in a small pre-revenue public company, you have to take, difficult, at times a little more toxic capital with warrants and rights offerings and things like that. Fortunately, we've moved past that. But one of the things that happens in the life cycle of a company that starts off public where we did is you just kind of move up the food chain. And so our last round, we've had the opportunity to say we're only looking for fundamentals. We don't want structured. The more the timing, market timing type folks. So we've had the luxury of doing that over time. But early on, we didn't really have that luxury. You had to take. I can
imagine.
You took what you could get.
Yeah. Adam, same question for you. What's the biggest learning, I guess, for investor base and capital structure?
I would definitely echo a lot of the things that people have already said here a bit, which is that choosing your investors wisely matters a ton. Of course, that is a luxury that we don't always have. Certainly didn't in the beginning. We were pretty fortunate. Also, we're pretty oversubscribed, and we're able to haircut people a bit in this pipe, as well as to just upsize it overall. But I definitely would. I think one of the things that I would echo the most is not just choosing the fund, but also choosing the partner at the fund. It matters a ton. I'd say for even more than just having a good working relationship with the person, right? I mean, this is somebody you're getting married to. If you're taking VC money, right? They can't leave. You can't leave. You're stuck.
Sure.
It's actually probably more than marriage. But I'd say in that you should expect to go through really rough times with them. Something I never predicted was that we'd have a pandemic along with everybody else, I think. And having the decision makers who not only believe in the story, believe in the long-term mission, but are also the key decision makers at the fund. Is not to downplay the importance of associates and everyone else at these VC funds, but having key decision makers who, if you hit a tough spot, can actually really be the one to just convince their partnership to pony up if they need to is, I think, something that can make or break a company as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons to not just choose the fund, but also choose the partner who you'll work well with and has the ability to drive, has that dry powder and the ability to use it.
Well, this entrepreneur empathy, right, is kind of that's the big luxury, right? So especially as you go later stage into public investments, there are fewer and fewer people that have been in your skin and in your shoes. And if you can find somebody who, having been in it or even not, but just has the understanding, I think that's a big plus, because it's capital, but it's also just understanding why things don't go the way that you think they should from a perspective of a PowerPoint,
Do you guys think that location is important for capital? I mean, physical location,
I
headquarters
do.
of the company?
To the point of U.S. capital markets versus Europe, I mean, I think we've gone a long way in Europe, but, it's not comparable, right? So you have, the depth and the sophistication that is certainly geographically different, especially in healthcare, because that's, usually a bit of a separate cluster of folks.
Nadine, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for us, we launched in the U.S. early last year, and it became a huge focus market for us. It's probably our largest market now. It's more than 50 to 60% of our business. So it was really important for us raising this round that we had investors U.S.-based as we beef up and continue to scale our team. Whilst there was, I'm sure like Dennis and others, interest from European funds, we were strategic in picking our three funds that came from the States. And I think that's important not only because of the location of the funding, but the access to the network of the market here, access to even hiring talent, all the other things that we're trying to kind of grow through.
Do you have to be at a center, Northern California, Boston, Lishan, you're in New York. That's a little bit of an unusual place to start a medical device startup.
Yeah, I actually want to add one other comment about the location. When you're in the early stages and you're not desperate, but you're anxious to raise capital, you'll get inquiries. We got inquiries from China, we got inquiries from the Middle East, and it's sort of this this shiny object that gets dangled in front of you, and it's it seems attractive. And fortunately, we didn't pull the trigger on any of that. And I think that falls under the rubric of all capital is encumbered in some way, and you really need, $1 million is not $1 million is not $1 million, right? So, so you have to really understand what comes with that, and fortunately, we didn't have to, and we've been exclusively in the U.S. markets.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up a good question. I mean, how picky can you be when you're just starting?
You can't be too picky in terms of the U.S. capital. I mean, we were very retail, almost exclusively retail in the first few years, and it's been a bit of a gradual slog to get meaningful institutional investors. We had named mutual funds participate in this last round. So again, you're sort of working your way up the food chain along the way. But when you start, it's a lot of it's retail, and that can be very finicky, volatile capital if you're in the public markets.
Do you have any advice here for Adam, who's just starting off on the public?
I actually do. I have one very important piece of advice, which is don't look at your stock price and stay off of stock twits. I'm totally serious. It can actually, it's one of the challenges, that's part of kind of a broader issue being a public company, which is that you're measured on quarterly basis and everything is short term, and trying to sort of stick to your strategic perspective on things is very difficult. And it's very difficult. In the early days, I had a level 2. I was watching every trade, and I hired a director of IR, and at 4:30 on Friday every day he gives us a summary of what happened during the week, and for the most part I just don't I just don't look at it during the week because
Really?
Yes,
it can mess
certainly easier said than done. But
And there are times where I can tell, like if my employees say, "Is it okay if I buy stock?" I'm like, "Oh man, the stock's down
I need to
today,"
look down.
you know. But so it's hard. You do get little hints here and there. But as a general matter, it's an important. I really think it's an incredibly important thing to not get caught up in the day-to-day volatility.
Really? Yeah. Maybe just, I think we probably have time for, one or two more questions, or kind of lessons learned and advice for the audience. Let's start with Adam and just go that way.
I mean, I think there's so many lessons learned. Whoever
Top two.
Yeah, whoever said to me once that you probably do more things wrong than right. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned though is that you have to be ready to adapt, learn, grow, and be willing to, like, I think what defines success and failure often is the ability to recognize failure and turn it into success, right? And the ability to accept that something's not working and figure out the way that will work. I'd say the other probably single biggest lesson that
Can you give a quick example of that? That's one that's not too embarrassing, I guess.
Fundraising strategy, right? If you're meeting with a particular, this is about fundraising, so let's try to keep it topical. If you're meeting with a particular set of investors and say a slice of conventional VCs, and you pretty quickly realize that they're not going to bite on the story, the ability to kind of accept defeat, turn, move on, and find the investors that will, I think, is incredibly important. Rather than you can easily waste a ton of time doing diligence with investors who very well may be just doing diligence on a different deal. So the ability to kind of pivot, and move forward. Pivoting is not necessarily a bad thing. Say probably second biggest lesson, if not the biggest lesson, has been trust your team. I think when it's a weird lesson to have to learn when you start a company and it's just a couple of you, and you have to do everything yourself, and now we're over 100 people, and I have to do almost nothing myself, and I actually have to do almost nothing myself. Otherwise, we'll never get anything done, and I'll just piss off my team.
Great advice. Dennis, same thing too. Top two lessons learned or pieces of advice?
Yeah. I mean, the way we kind of grew up was in a way where we had to, as a lot of you guys, do a lot of fundraising without the inbound board support. Like, we didn't have early stage VCs on the board. I think that's a big ingredient that I wish we would have had. So it forced us to get good at it internally. One of my lessons is that you can get good at it, but you have to also invest in it. Like, you have to have a professional fundraising organization. You can't assume that you're just going to do it on PowerPoint. You need folks in finance, you need analysts, you need to invest. If you really want to raise a lot of money yourself, you should have a team that is for fundraising.
Really? It's amazing.
And I think that's worked for us. On the second lessons learned, that's has to do with the kind of complexity of the data business that we have. As you're trying to communicate the story, and you can't stick to the KPIs that everybody would understand, which is 400% growth of sales in top US customers, because it's too early for you, but you want to get credit for something you've built up. You need to think really hard about the key dependencies that you have in your business to getting to those simple KPIs, and those are not usually as many as you think about. And if you can build your story around those dependencies, and not just the story but the backup, and again back in that professional fundraising setup, you can convince pretty much anybody, right?
And is that an internal team or an external team that you hire?
We did both. We raised our Series B with an investment bank, and we did the 100 million Series C entirely ourselves, no bankers, right? But ourselves means not like, yes, there were executives, our COO, myself, but there's also really dedicated few investment professionals in the company.
Okay. Nadine?
I mean, I'd echo a lot of what's been said already, but I think the few things that I experienced personally through the journey of kind of raising multiple rounds is, really prepare. Maybe that's a clinical side of me as well, but we turned up with this round, and it's not like you're dipping your toes in. You're going in. We set ourselves a timeline from day one. We said, we're going to get the first term sheet in 8 weeks or 10 weeks, and we're going to do this. And you map out the end goal and kind of work backwards, and you build the team around you that you trust, and then you go for it. And I think that approach allowed us to really, I think it was Thanksgiving, we said, we're going to raise a round. We spent 2 weeks preparing for everything we needed, and we just hit go. And about 6 to 8 weeks later, we had our first term sheet. So it was really kind of tight focus, execution, and make sure then you've trusted, and as Adam said, trust your team to kind of pick up the pieces because you're out there fundraising, and really trust them and lean on them and make them know how much you appreciate the work they're doing while you're out there fundraising.
Great.
I think that's one. And the second I would say is listen. It's an incredible opportunity for CEOs to get to meet so many different investors and listen to all the different perspectives and get pushback and get rejection and all the things that you're going to get. But from that, you learn so much about how perhaps your messaging is coming across or what your business fits in the wider spectrum of all the different things that they're seeing, because they've got a bird's eye view when you're just you're in your narrow, your thing, and you're focusing on your company.
What was the, if you can publicly state it, what was the kind of hardest rejection on the fundraising side that you experienced?
I think, it's a hard thing. I don't know anyone who will say we never got rejected. I think if they are, that they're not telling the truth. But, part of it, we recognize that there's probably 2 or 3 reasons why either the story wasn't crisp enough and there wasn't landing. It's very easy to get this kind of situational bias where your thing so well and people just need to understand it because you're explaining it the way. So coming back and thinking, are we actually presenting the story the right way? Does it make sense? Is it in as straightforward terms as possible? So I think that was one around messaging. The second is actually taking people on the journey, rather than saying it's a 20 billion TAM or it's a 100 billion TAM, actually showing them, that evidence is key. And I think what we, with this last round, it was very clear for every particular claim or information we were sharing, there was clear evidence, there was market data, there was everything behind what we were saying was backed. And so that ability to give the investors confidence to then pick forward and ask more questions was really key.
So in the early days, what was your percentage of acceptance versus rejection from the larger VC players?
Yeah, I'm sure like many people, it's a lot of no's. You kiss many frogs before you get your prince. I don't know that changes over time. You still kiss a lot of frogs.
20%?
Less than 10 for me.
Less than 10? Yeah.
No rejection. No, I'm joking. But with time, you learn the drill. You learn and you adapt and you listen and then you kind of evolve.
Okay. Lishan, we'll just round it out with you.
Yeah, sure. I think maybe I'll start with sort of a more general philosophical lesson, which is to not assume the script. Don't let someone hand you a script and say this is how you do it. I remember when we were raising the IPO, I called on a friend who was a med tech and was asking people to invest, and he said, I thought the rule was that you couldn't go public until you had 30 million in revenue, like it was actually in statute that you couldn't do that. And so I think it's important to know who you are, know what your vision is, and tailor your strategy, not according to some script, but according to what makes sense for you. I'm restless. I'm always want to be in a position where I can pounce on opportunities and not be sort of, pigeonholed into certain areas. So that made sense for us. If I'm got to go A, B, C, D, and I'm heading over there, and it's a straight line, then there are probably other pathways that make sense. So that's that. I think on the couple of in the public, being a public company CEO. I think it's really important to be transparent and to be super honest about what's going on. You always want to be, positive and get people, have people feel just like you do with your team, that you want people to feel upbeat and positive about things, but you don't want to, you want to avoid sort of drifting into just being promotional about you're a company, you're not a stock, and you don't want to get into that trap, which is very easy to fall into. And I'll just give you one quick example. There was one day quite early on when we had our quarterly call. I was an hour before getting on our quarterly call, and I got a bad call from our regulatory advisor saying the FDA had encouraged us to pull an application and resubmit it. And everybody was focused on this. I was pissed. And so I got on the call, and I had investors tell me later, it's like, wow, we could tell you were pissed. We could tell what was actually going on inside you, and we found that refreshing, and we stuck with you to do that. So I know you said two, but I'm going to have one other real quick one, which is if you're going to contemplate being a public company, you have to have a highly experienced trustworthy CFO. I mean, I have a gentleman, Dennis McGrath, who's been in this business. He's a grizzled veteran. He's done this for 20 years. There's a lot of complexities. There are a lot of pitfalls and mines along the way where you can seriously get yourself into deep trouble.
Probably a GC too, right?
Careful about that.
I mean,
yeah, and a good
I
GC
can't
as
imagine
well.
doing this without both our CFO and our
So
GC.
that's super critical. So.
That's great. Any other parting words of wisdom from anybody on the panel here?
I think there's been a theme of humility over the last 2 days. We've heard it on a number of panels, and I think I would echo that again. You know, coming across, there's an element, I think, of confidence, but not arrogance, and I think that doesn't necessarily rub people the right way. So just coming across as humble, transparent. These are the things that are going really well. These are the bits that I'm going to look for help with. Actually lands and resonates really well. We heard a lot of great feedback from investors about just how open, transparent, and kind of humble the team came across. And I think that's probably with those kind of nuggets of feedback you get back, and you really kind of cherish the team for continuing to evolve with that persona.
That's great.
I love that. I think the way I would phrase it is it's not about always being right. It's about always figuring it out, right? And it's okay to be wrong as long as you figure it out in the end.
Well, maybe just in the spirit of the fact that this is, again, shout out to the organizers in-person meeting, right? You always have believers and non-believers, and there are believers who will give you the benefit of the doubt and allow you to present your case, and you should really work hard to find those, because those are even fewer than the percentage that will invest. Lead investors, they're not always lead. Sometimes they're in the syndicate, but they can help you. That's very important. That's I personally am a huge believer that we're going to get back to some sort of clustered approach of investors and entrepreneurs being very close to each other, not only over Zoom, because I think that's important. The emotional aspect of trusting another person with your money is huge.
That's great. Well, congratulations to you all on successful fundraising in the last few years and running successful enterprises. It's amazing. So thanks very much for all of your time.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.